Mr. Shaw, welcome to the program. Tuesday was your last day in your job, and you made it clear that you had discomfort with a lot of things that happened in the White House. Remind us of exactly what the president has reported financially and why, you were uncomfortable with what was going on.
Well, thanks for having me. This is my first day as a private citizen. The president filed a financial disclosure report that breaks out his various holdings consistent with the Ethics in Government Act. They're fairly complex holdings, and, we analyzed them as best we could. But the bigger issue for me is that the financial disclosure form reveals vast holdings in a wide range of businesses, and he's done nothing to resolve those conflicts of interest. In fact, he went so far as to say a president can't have conflicts of interest, which is an absurd statement because, of course, a president or any other human person can have conflicts of interest, but the law doesn't make them illegal for the president for a fairly technical reason. Past presidents have done what they can to live up to that law by selling off their assets.
Yeah, and by any measure, the presidency of Donald Trump has been unorthodox and unprecedented. Having said that, in a statement to the New York Times after they had done an interview with you, the White House said the truth is Mr. Schwab is not interested in advising the executive branch on ethics. He's interested in grandstanding and lobbying. How do you react to that? They gave this statement while you were technically still in the job, even though you're not today. How do you react to that criticism?
Well, that's just the playbook of this White House, that if anybody speaks truth to power in the United States anymore, they're going to smear them. And so they did a coordinated campaign, it appears, with various conservative media outlets to try to smear me. But there's some objective facts. First of all, they didn't fire me. I quit. Second of all, the most important work right now that we do in the Office of Government Ethics is move the president's nominees, who have to get confirmed by the United States Senate before they could start working in the government. We've moved those nominees faster than we moved the nominees in the Obama administration during the last presidential transition, and that was no easy task because their financial holdings were much more complex because they were wealthier, and frankly, because of the bad tone set from the top by the president, a number of them, not all, but a number of them pushed back against having to comply with ethical rules with an intensity we've just never seen before.
Well, apparently President Trump, and to say this, and this is, it's not a theoretical thing, it is a fact. If you can just go through, he owns golf courses, other properties, a hotel very close to the White House. What were your specific concerns about the fact that he continues to hold these properties, is profiting from these properties, his family's profit from the properties, and that he attends them? Most recently, just last week, he was at his own golf course.
Yeah, well, that last point is really an important one. By not selling off his assets, he's put in question every governmental decision. We can't know what his intent is, but we shouldn't have to wonder, and it raises a question as to whether or not his decisions are motivated by his policy aims or his own personal financial interests. In fact, his flagship property, a famous hotel in Washington, D.C., is actually housed in a gigantic government-owned building that he's leasing from the government, so he's his own landlord and tenant. I'd say that's a pretty cozy situation if you'd like to be on both ends of a deal with yourself.
One would say, Mr. Schwab, that, look, it's the weakness in the law. Did we not see this coming? Is there not? What are you calling for in terms of change going forward? If we give the president complete credit that he wanted to do the legal thing, he is doing the legal thing.
No, I don't think any credit's deserved because he did absolutely nothing at all. There is a policy these days of bare minimum legal compliance. Now, listen, the legal compliance in the executive branch of the federal government is the difference between being a criminal and not being a criminal. I think we deserve better than to be able to say the president is not a criminal. I'd hope we'd set the bar a little higher, and I hope he'll set the bar a little bit higher for him. I'm not fighting against him. I'm fighting for the ethics program so that people can have confidence in the institutions of our government.
And in terms of why it matters, I've been all over the world, and when you talk to governments specifically, but even people on the street, they say that the United States is quite hypocritical, that they say, do as I say, not as I do. Do you have concerns about the moral credibility of the United States around the world with this Trump administration in office?
Well, when we set a terrible example, I think we run the risk of them being right, that we are being hypocritical. I'd like to be able to put our best foot forward and say to the world, we're doing the right thing and we'd like you to do the right thing too. And until recently, I believe we were able to do that.
And now you say?
Well, you know, they have a lot of things they can say. I'm frankly ashamed.
In terms of when you've pushed back to the White House staff or to the White House lawyers and said, okay, you've got this financial disclosure form here, can you do more? Will you do more? What's been the reaction?
The Office of Government Ethics collects standard ethics records from across the executive branch all the time. It's one of the main things we do. Well, they fought us tooth and nail, and it took a month to finally get them to agree to release those. And when they did, they released a collection of waivers, most of which were unsigned and undated, and many of them appeared to be retroactive. And in fact, the counsel to the president himself issued 2 of them to a group of people that included himself. So he's both issuer and recipient of a waiver, saying, I think I'm going to waive the rules for myself. And that's just terrible. That is not how ethics programs have been run. And it creates the appearance, if you're giving retroactive waivers, that there have already been violations and you're just trying to paper them over.
You're proposing that we do have more stringent laws. Do you think that's going to solve the problem? I mean, some people have commented that, look, you can't legislate behavior.
You know, in the past, we've been able to rely on the voluntary compliance of presidents. I guess we're in a new era where we can't, and so we need laws to enforce that.
And when you say we need laws to enforce that, I mean, do you really suggesting a complete wholesale change so that if a person like President Trump comes back into office, there is no way that they can hold the presidency and continue to have all of these real estate holdings, business holdings, and would have to divest?
Well, I'm not proposing that there be a qualification requirement that if you don't do this, you can't be president. But I am proposing that we pass a law that says you have to do this. And then if you're a lawbreaker, Congress can deal with your behavior.
You mentioned today's your first day as a private citizen. The White House, it's only been 6 months. How do you intend to be an advocate going forward?
Well, first of all, it's been 8 months for me because we started working with the new administration right the day after the election. But I do intend to be an advocate going forward. I've joined a nonprofit group called the Campaign Legal Center that is headed by a former Republican chair of the Federal Election Commission. And so one of the things we're going to focus on is try to build some bipartisan support for these changes. There are really good people in both parties in Congress, and many of them care about government ethics. And I'm hoping to appeal to that interest in them. And if needed, to appease, you know, to solicit bipartisan support, I'd be fine with the new laws taking effect in January 2021 so that the president has the opportunity to decide if he wants to run again under these new terms.
Well, we will continue to follow your efforts. Mr. Schaub, thanks so much for being so generous with your time.
Thank you.